Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'd like to tell you the story of how I got stuck in the elevator with the girl I liked. Her name is Allison, and I never imagined that I'd get to spend so much time with her with no one else around. It was both a blessing and a curse, I can tell you as much. Allison was an incredibly beautiful girl. She had the prettiest blue eyes and dark short hair. She was also the smartest girl in my class. I was in awe of Allison, but was too shy to speak to her, so she didn't even know I existed. The perfect chance to finally change this fact came right after class had ended on a boring Friday afternoon. Most of the students had already left for the weekend, and I saw Allison getting on the elevator. She was probably going up to the library to return her books. I rushed forward, not even thinking twice about it. If I got in the elevator with her, maybe I'd finally get a chance to speak to her. I wanted to find out so much about Allison. What she liked, what she hated, what her favorite book was. I'd admired her from afar for so long, but didn't know almost anything about her personal life. I wanted to change this fact, and I wanted her to know more about me as well. I wished that maybe she might find me interesting, and perhaps, just perhaps, get the courage to actually ask her out on a date. I had daydreamed so often about this moment. There were so many jokes and cute remarks I'd pictured myself saying in every imaginary conversation. She laughed and smiled constantly. She was interested in me, at least in my head, but in the real world, Allison didn't even know my name. Perhaps this was my chance to finally change this fact. The problem was, I had rushed to get to the elevator before the door closed. I wish that she hadn't seen me running, because that would have been so lame. I actually placed my foot in between the doors to keep them from closing, and managed to get inside just in time. When I stepped inside, she gave me a sweet little smile, and then looked up ahead again. As I had imagined, the floor she had selected was the one leading up to the library. She was so responsible and well-read. I know that might not sound like an amazing trait to some people, but to me, it only made me fancy her more. Anyways, I kept trying to talk to her, and knew that the elevator trip would be super short, but every time I tried to open my mouth, I felt sick to my stomach. When I thought all hope was lost, something strange happened. The elevator suddenly rocked from side to side and then came to a sudden halt. We almost fell to the ground, but I managed to hold her just before she tripped over. I ended up with my arms wrapped around her, leaning back against the lift's wall to regain my balance. She blushed and thanked me, standing back up. I felt awful about not having her in my arms any longer, but I couldn't let her know that, so I just smiled timidly and shrugged. We both tried to see what was wrong with the elevator, but it seemed just to be stuck. So we pressed the emergency button and decided it was best to wait for help to arrive. She gave me a few awkward looks, but we just stood there in perfect silence for the first few minutes or two. Finally, she introduced herself, and I pretended I didn't already know her name. I did tell her I thought I had seen her in a few of my classes, and she seemed surprised. Apparently, she had never even noticed me before. That kind of stung, but I shrugged it off. The past didn't matter any longer, only the future. And if I played my cards right, there might be a future for both of us after all. The conversation was admittedly a bit awkward at first. We talked about our classes and the weather, and we kept getting stuck in these uncomfortable silences before one of us dared to speak again. After a while, we tried pressing the button again and heard it ring. Surely someone would be there to help us out shortly, we figured out. After all, the bell was really loud. So we began talking more openly, and that made me feel better. She was really funny, just like I had imagined. But the problem was, minutes kept going by and no one came to help us. That was when we began to get really nervous. Alice and I decided to begin screaming for help and banging on the walls of the elevator. No one answered. I checked the time and realized that by that hour, every single student had left already, and probably most of the teachers. We were stuck in there, and might have to stay locked in an elevator all through the weekend. We immediately began freaking out for real. It took us some time to calm down. She was in tears, but I reminded her that our parents would get worried soon, so we might have to wait a few hours, but someone would eventually come to help us. Or so I hoped. She seemed to believe me and wiped off her tears. I mean, I know we both understood that even if our parents realized we were missing, they might not think to look for us at school. But it was a reassuring thought, and we both clung to it. Panicking would only make a bad situation worse. I suggested we play a game to relax, and she agreed. We both sat down on the floor and began asking questions to each other. The more we played, the bolder and sillier the questions got. I really learned a lot from Allison, and I told her a lot about myself. I'd never felt closer to anyone in my life. It seemed like the right time to admit my feelings for her had finally arrived. I was going to do it. At long last, I was going to tell Allison that I was in love with her, and I wanted to take her out on a real date. But before I managed to speak up, she suddenly blurted out that she was pregnant. I was in absolute shock. I asked her what she was talking about. Apparently, she'd been keeping that secret bottled up for 2 weeks, and she couldn't deal with it any longer. She needed to tell someone, and I seemed like such a sweet and trustworthy guy. Allison explained that she was dating this guy from another school, and she didn't even realize that she'd gotten pregnant until the morning sickness began. She tried telling him about it, but the guy was apparently not very nice. He once began joking about how he'd run away in a second if a chick ever tried to tie him down with a pregnancy trick. Yes, he used the word chick. What a girl like Allison was doing with a guy like that, I couldn't understand. She was sure that he'd think that she'd gotten pregnant to force him to marry her. She didn't dare tell him, and her parents would be super mad and disappointed with her. Allison told me she felt stuck, and she didn't know where to go for help. I told her that she didn't have to feel that way. It was a bump on the road, but she was smart and strong enough to pull through any adversity. She was so thankful and called me sweet, giving me a peck on the cheek. It was the best and worst moment of my life. I enjoyed the kiss, but I also knew that she was going out with another guy now. So yeah, you can say it was a bittersweet moment. The problem was, it was already really dark outside, and no one had come looking for us. We were both really hungry and didn't know how long we'd be stuck in there. We were getting really worried again that no one would rescue us until Monday. I had a few crackers and a bit of leftovers from my lunch that I shared with Allison, and that ended up being our dinner. Teasingly, I told her that this was sort of a date, and she chuckled at my joke. I wasn't really joking, though, or at least I hoped I wasn't. We barely slept at all that night, too worried and scared to rest. She did place her head on my shoulder and took a short nap, though. Allison was so warm and smelled so good. It was so much temptation to have her there, so close to me. Morning arrived, and still there wasn't any sign that anyone was coming to rescue us. We were getting thirsty, and we shared the last drops of juice that she had in her bag. That was it. From then on, we didn't have anything else to drink or eat, and it was only Saturday. We were really starting to freak out, but I didn't want to let her know that I was scared. After all, she was pregnant, and stress wasn't good for the baby. I tried to distract her by telling her silly stories and talking about my life. I also asked her a lot of questions about her personal life, and little by little, I got her to calm down. It was such a relief. Seeing her doing better made me relax as well. We talked for hours and hours, and really enjoyed each other's company. Sure, the situation was horrible, but at least we had each other. By midday, I finally decided I had nothing to lose. I admitted my feelings for her, and told Allison that a guy like her boyfriend didn't deserve her. If she was with me, I'd help her take care of her baby. She was so surprised at first, but a moment later she smiled. Allison told me that was the sweetest thing that anyone had ever said to her. And then, she kissed me. I couldn't believe what was happening. The kiss was everything I had imagined and more. It was truly a magical moment, and I forgot all about being trapped in that elevator. Suddenly, we heard noises coming from a floor down. Someone was screaming her name. We called back, relieved and surprised. It was the school's janitor, accompanied by the principal and Allison's parents. They knew their daughter would never disappear like that, and that she had been heading toward the library, so they contacted the school's headmaster. No one knew I was there, but I, later on, found out that my parents had gone to the police. The problem was they had no idea where to begin searching for me. We were freed half an hour later, and I had never felt more relieved. Allison hugged her parents, and then she blurted out that she was pregnant. They were so relieved that she was okay that they didn't really get mad at her, so getting stuck in an elevator might have been a blessing after all. The very next day, I got a text from Allison asking me to hang out. She had dumped her good-for-nothing boyfriend and wanted to know if I really meant what I said in the lift. I told her I did and officially asked her out on a date. That was 5 years ago. Now we're married, and I adopted Allison's daughter. She is the most amazing little girl in the world. Thank you for watching. Have you ever had a crush on someone who doesn't even know your name? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel.